Hi, this is a little tutorial, a mini tutorial on drawing stick figures for yoga poses and other practices. You may have your own system of doing this. I certainly developed mine over many years, and I just thought I'd give you a few pointers as you work with the practices that we're going to be doing. It's very helpful in a yoga therapy context in giving people practices so you don't have to type everything out. And also because a lot of people can't easily put together what you want them to do just by reading the words. It's great if you give a few words, maybe a few directions, say how many times to repeat something, repeat it on the other side, things like that, but also show with a little tiny stick figure drawing. Not that it has to be small. So here's an example. I might give down dog, downward facing dog pose in a yoga therapeutic prescription of practices, or I might use something like this in a class if I'm just making notes on a group class that I'm teaching and I want to just quickly indicate the postures. I can do stick figures there too. I might, if I'm writing out a yoga therapy prescription that might have, say, 8 to 10 to maybe even 20 or even upwards over time practices involved. I usually try to abbreviate the names if possible, so I might just use down dog instead of downward facing dog, but you could choose whatever way you want to do it. Sometimes I'll have a variation of downward dog. Maybe someone is unable to do the full pose on their hands and feet, so I might have them go over to their sofa or a table or a countertop or something like that. So I will just use the name, instead of downward dog, I'll use the name table dog, and they'll know the pose is table dog. It helps if I do that, because then we know which thing we're talking about. A lot of times as someone progresses, they'll go from doing downward dog at the table to eventually going straight to the full pose, which is wonderful success. So we have different language for different variations. And behind using table dog, I may write VARI with a dot, or just an abbreviation for variation, and then I'll put a longer name for a pose. Sometimes people like that, and sometimes just the one phrase is enough. And oftentimes, people like to know the Sanskrit. It's easier to sometimes look up a posture and its variations, or what variation they might be doing, if they have the Sanskrit transliteration into English. So Adho Mukha, Svanasana, I may include, but I might also just have down dog or table dog. So, or some other pose. So the easiest way to do this is to just draw a circle, a ball, and a stick. When you draw a ball, you have a head. I usually start the drawing with the head. It's easier for me. And when I am thinking about a pose and I'm about to draw it, I often try to visualize the whole pose before I start to draw. So if I were going to draw down dog or table dog or something like that, if I'm going to draw down dog, I usually have a line for the floor. I might not always, but I'll often draw a line for the floor, and then I'll think, where's the head? The head's about here, and then I get my proportions. So I'll draw a head. I've got the arms coming down, the spine going up, the legs going down, and then the feet. To indicate the direction the head is facing, I'll put a nose on it. It could just be a simple line. Sometimes an eye will do. So if I want to change the direction of the head, I can just put the nose on the other side. When the head is facing forward, I'll often put two eyes or even a smiling yoga face. And when the head is facing away, like right now I'm facing away from you and you see the back of my head, I'll draw, I'll color it in. I'll color in the circle. I'll fill it in with color, so that that's the back of the head. So here in downward dog, I would put a nose, so you would see where the nose is. Sometimes when people add body parts to a head and a spine, arms, legs, pretty easy. You can make the legs a little longer. Sometimes they'll put hands, looks sort of like a teardrop shape, or a little noose kind of shape. Person's actually standing on their toes, so, or lying down, so if you want them standing, you could put them in relation to the floor. That takes a little bit more time, so a lot of times I'll just do a flat line, like a check mark almost, for feet and hands, nose, eyes, back of the body. Another key that I use to make this go quickly, because if you are going to use stick figures to indicate postures after you've taught them to make a practice for someone, one of the factors involved is time. You might be a really highly skilled artist and whipping together a picture is easy for you, but that's not the case for most of us. So if you get involved in a lot of drawing, it's going to take a lot of your time. So you might have an hour-long session, and you want to take your notes, put them in a form that the person can follow and be clear, but you don't want it to take another whole hour or hour and a half till you get that drawing done. And so for the sake of time efficiency, sticks are better than drawing the whole thing. So some of my other little methods here are to show revolution. I might just draw a semicircle with an arrow, so this person's head would turn to the right. They would maybe start left and turn right, something like that. Another thing I will do is if there's a posture, I usually draw the postures from the side. So if, like you saw, downward dog, usually somebody's standing and I have to choose which direction they're facing, and that would be the nose and the feet. That person's facing off to face me. So that's fine when you're standing. Sometimes you'll draw a pose, the person's facing you, like maybe just a simple seated cross-legged pose, like easy pose. So in that case, I just kind of indicate the legs are crossed and the hands are down, and that's often enough. But when someone's lying down, it's a little hard to show that. So what I do is I use a key of a yoga mat. Like I just draw some sort of rectangle, and I might just indicate the eyes or maybe the little smile. And then if they're twisting to the side, maybe their legs are going side, they're in a reclined spinal twist pose. If I want to indicate that the palms are down in this pose, I would draw those little nooses or little teardrop shapes. And similar to the back of the head where I filled it in, I would fill in the back of the hand to kind of indicate that the palms are down on the floor. So those are the conventions that I use to draw stick figures. I'm asking you to do that and to practice them. You get faster at it as you practice. If you wanted to, you could create ahead of time a page of a practice. Like I might decide I'm going to do a page for downward dog, and you could show all the variations on it. And then when you go to give it to someone, you could just circle that variation. Sometimes I'll use a different color when I circle a variation that I have, but then I have to print it in color. So that's one possibility. If I'm going to draw a table dog or something, I often will draw the furniture in very stick fashion, a table. These are all from the side, a chair, that sort of thing. Just, a bolster if someone's going to arch back over it, something like that. So you can use as much efficiency as you like. But if you were to choose to do just one pose per sheet of paper, and you could create your sheets for postures you use often, that's one way to not have to draw so much, and then use that circling method. The only thing about that's a great way. The pitfalls of that can be that you end up giving out like 20 sheets of paper sometimes, a lot of paper, or people don't want to print out all that paper if you scan it and send it to them. That's just one thought. What you can also do is just get a couple of little binders, hole punch the papers and just hand them a little binder. That's one way to do it. The way that I do it most recently is I might have a series of postures just listed down the page. Maybe it'll be one page or a double-sided sheet. That's usually the maximum for any one practice that I do. And I just put the name, draw the posture or the series or whatever it is. And I wanted to say my little tools for this are, I have a lined sheet that I put underneath. I use a lot of white paper, just like printer paper, and I'll just I use a clipboard to make it nice and hard and firm, and then I'll clip a piece over that line paper so I can fairly well see if I'm going downhill or uphill or just going horizontal, so I can see through it. I'll also sometimes pad this with a couple of sheets of paper as well underneath the line paper, so that it's not going to bleed through either onto my clipboard or the table, and it gives it a thicker line when you do that. So lots of paper. I use a black ultra fine point Sharpie. That's what works really well. It's not too small, it's not too big, it's not too thick. I like these a lot. And then you have to have a little bit of white out for when you make a mistake or you just can make a smudge or something like that. And then some kind of thumb drive, so you can scan it in and then email it. If you like, you can buy these more like permanent hardcore thumb drives and store all your practices on them, and then you can pull them off as you need to. So that's about it for stick figure drawing. Please let me know if you have any questions. SYMT@SpandaYoga.com. Thanks.